Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back yet to a brand new video. Once again, this is Tarafdar, your guide and mentor. Now, it's been some time I haven't posted a video in this channel, and the reason as to why is because I've been occupied with my existing business infrastructures, and of course I wanted to give you guys something that would be meaningful, as I promised last time. And today's video, I want to talk a little bit about dealing with debt collectors, right? So a lot of people have difficulties with debt collectors because A, they're constantly trying to get them off their credit reports, either by trying to challenge them via dispute letters and stuff like that, or they're probably having a challenge trying to get them to accept a condition at which you would pay and they would settle. And from that perspective, they take themselves off the credit report. Lately, what's happening is we're going to start with the dynamics of the debt collection industry. And some of the changes, and things that we need to be aware of and apprised of. Specifically, if we're trying to challenge those debt collectors, if we're trying to get them, out of our credit reports, if we're trying to get rid of them. There's a lot of things we need to know, and specifically with the economics of COVID-19 and post-COVID, all these type of business activities that are happening in the financial institutions taking a huge hit, non-performance on loans and toxic debt and so on and so forth. This is going to create a landscape of debt collection that's like you've never seen before. It's going to be a lot more aggressive. You're going to have a lot of challenges trying to, put yourself in a position of security, and all sorts of stuff is going to happen. So for that, purpose and specific reason, this video is going to be extremely critical because it's one of those things that A, you need to be aware of, number one, and B, you need to know how to navigate yourself in this space given the economics of what's going to happen. So with all that said, I want to kind of get you guys started on some of the things we need to kind of understand with this space. Number one, what's been happening? What's the latest? What's the issues, and what are some of the things and changes that we need to be aware of when it comes to these type of debt collectors? Well, number one, economics have set in such a way that their businesses have taken a hit, right? There's a lot less collection activity that can happen. There's a lot less resources being deployed because of manpower hours. There's a lot of, things that are causing a sort of issue with their business model. So these debt collectors, unless they're really large, like in LVNV funding, Midland and so on and so forth, a lot of these smaller practices that are getting this portfolio of different debts from different institutions that are written off are coming to a situation where now they have to deploy legal tactics and resources to keep their businesses afloat. Now, what does that mean for you? Well, if you're an individual that has a negative item in your credit report and you have a debt collector that's there and you seeing that you're having a hard time trying to get rid of that, chances are that if it's a fresh, brand new debt collection account, it's going to stay for a little while. But then as you start to get into the situation where you have to deal with debt collectors over time, you're going to notice an increased level of financial activity from those debt collectors. And what I mean by that is the financial activity essentially means that they're going to deploy and aggressively use aggressive tactics, right, to collect that debt. And that may be that they serve you some summons or they ask you to present yourself in court, and they go to the extent of actually suing you. Now, these are things that is going to be very, very practical and normal going forward into the realm of, the economics of post-20, 2021, et cetera, because these are things that we should be anticipating. I've even seen to the extent where, municipalities have issued, individual licensed practitioners of law to go ahead and, like bailiffs, to serve papers to customers to say, hey, you haven't paid your parking tickets for some time, and now we're going to seize your assets. Like, that's coming to a point where, an increased level of litigation is going to happen. So, that's the landscape of the future. And the reason I want to start with that baseline is because that is where the future of credit is going to be. It's going to be partially when it comes to negative items, right? Like, bad credit is caused by negative items. Obviously, it starts with a late payment or bankruptcy and so on and so forth. And it just leads on to a trail of other things that are kind of like the byproduct of such a result. Now, with that said, understanding that the future of credit is going to be in the economics of dealing with litigation or trying to figure out a way out of it, or perhaps protecting yourself from it, I think that's the angle in which you need to understand. So I just wanted to give you the lay of the land in terms of what's happening in the future and how to prepare yourself if that's the case, and what are some of the things that you need to do to ensure that you have an optimal level of success as you move into that realm, right? An optimal level of success is a lot of different things, right? It could be where you have a very high ratio of like you getting negative items removed from your credit reports. And then, of course, from that perspective, applying for funding to kind of mitigate the other financial obligations you have. And notice that I didn't say by removing an account from your credit report, you don't have to pay the debt anymore, because that's not the truth, right? The truth is, just because you have it off the credit report doesn't necessarily mean the debt disappears. A lot of people have a misconception of that. And the reality to that is, just because an account can be removed from a credit report doesn't necessarily put you in a situation where you no longer have to pay the debt, right? And the reality of that is also that you have to understand the difference between reporting and obligation. There's a huge discrepancy that a lot of people kind of misinterpret and think that, hey, negative items off the credit report, I don't have to deal with these guys anymore, right? So you have to be extremely careful as to that. And of course, you have to put yourself in a position where you can, frame that in a way that you can step into the territory where you can actually get access to resources to help you kind of mitigate the obligation part, but at the same, always constantly understanding the reporting rights that you have and how to optimize your reports to actually, get the maximum amount of funding and of course increase the credit score like you're looking to do. So with that, all that said, and out of the way, and that's the economics of what the future looks like. Let's focus on today's topic. It's going to be a slightly lengthy topic because I want to give you guys, context of what this is and why this is important. And notice that I wanted to give you guys, obviously within this video, the maximum amount of value that you can get when it comes to dealing with debt collectors. Now, the reason for me to doing this style and completely different from any other style is because this is what we're going to be focusing on moving forward, right? We're going to be focusing on the economics of dealing with your credit, right? Not necessarily just, gimmicks and flashy things and packages that are designed by car names and, we know those individuals, but what I'm doing here is giving you the resources that is actually what's going to matter at the end of the day, right? Like the outcome that's going to matter at the end of the day. So with that said, let's get started, right? So dealing with debt collectors. Now, 6 minutes in, obviously we talked about the economics of litigious structures of economics in the future and how debt collectors and any other parties may actually aggressively pursue you and deploy legal tactics to do what they have to because, again, their businesses have been drastically affected and they no longer have and they can no longer afford to sit on the sidelines and wait for hopefully somebody to pay them anymore. They're going to do what they have to do. Now, with that said, you have to prepare on your side to ensure that you have the maximum and optimum amount of value and security from your end. How do we do that? Well, the first thing is understanding the debt collectors, right? Like the structure in which we have to deploy to effectively protect ourselves in that structure. Now, what does that mean, right? So debt collectors, typically I look at a 3-step process when I'm dealing with them. Now, in the Ultimate Personal Credit Mastery course, which by all means, I'd encourage you guys to check it out if you're interested in actually leveling up your knowledge in the credit space, but also executing with the right tools and resources in the short amount of time to get the best outcome. The course is going to help you. This is just something I want to give you guys up front. But if not, then let's talk a little bit about this 3-step structure. The first thing I look at when it comes to debt collector is exactly what the root cause was and the effect as to why that debt came into the first place. Now, this may sound like a very basic thing. It's like, well, it was a charge-off account that kind of siphoned off into debt collection account, and then, of course, other debt collectors kind of participate on that. And the reality is that we need to understand that because that is going to be one of the biggest things that we're going to use as a leveraging point to fight those debt collectors. Now, how do we do that? Well, let's assume that it was originating from a charge-off account, right? Now, first and foremost, we have to look at the origin of the account. If the account was originated by a charge-off status, which ultimately it would be before it goes into a collection account, unless rare circumstances have it, then we need to understand what the account of the charge-off is looking like in the credit reports, right? The reason why this is critical is because the way that they are reporting on the credit reports from the origination side, should there be any type of structural issues within that, then, of course, the reporting infrastructure itself is incorrect. And therefore, having the right to report is kind of disqualified immediately. Now, this is a tool that you need to use because that is going to be a structure which you have to use against the charge-off accounts themselves. Now, when that happens, then you have a tool that you can say, hey, the original creditor, that your alleged creditor that you're stating, is incorrectly reporting on reports, and I'm guessing that the information they're reporting is inaccurate, and therefore what you're stating here is also inaccurate and deemed accurate. You have a couple of days to remove the negative account. If not, then I will pursue you. So you have to reverse that cycle, right? And this is where you have to understand that, right? So again, it's called the root cause and effect. What it means is the original creditor, how are they reporting? And if there are issues there, then anything given off from that, unless otherwise adjusted or completely modified to reflect accurately, any other siphoned off accounts or representations that are coming on the credit report thereafter, including debt collectors, of course, are going to be in an effect where it's inaccurate and they're reporting information that is carried forward from that original creditor. So this is one of the biggest things you need to use and leverage. Now, you have to understand, right? If you don't do this step, there's a possibility that no matter how long you try or how much you fight, all the other guys can have a free-for-all situation, which means they can go out there and sell that debt to other debt collectors and so on and so forth. It's going to just be an economic cycle of nonsense. Whereas if you deal with the root cause, with the original creditor, you have a high likelihood of success. And number one, you have the tools that demonstrate that, hey, you've done your part, and then anything forward, it's going to be inevitably powerful because they can't take information that's incorrect and kind of report it again and again, right? So that's one of the biggest tools that I use, to ensure success with my clients. The second thing you want to talk about is like the phase and the timeline, right? Now, this is important because you have to understand how long that debt collector has the right to report, how long they're going to stay on the report. Essentially, is the statute of limitation on reporting. One of the biggest things you have to understand when you're analyzing your credit reports is if you're dealing with a debt collector that's been there for some time, and you literally have like 2 to 3 months away from statute of limitation, depending on where your state is and how long they can actually report or collect, that's the number one rule, right? Now, there's a lot of people who are in these situations where you're going to say, hey, look, the debt collector is reactivating these accounts and creating new dates and stuff, so it's kind of hard to understand how long they've been around. In those instances, you have the right to request that. When did you acquire this debt? Right? You have to get a confirmation from that perspective. If you don't do that, then what's going to happen is the debt collector doesn't have any obligation towards you to answer that, and therefore you're kind of left in the limbo and you don't have certainty of an outcome that you can create or use or leverage to your advantage. Now, how do we do this? You have to ask the debt collector, and this is in writing, preferably. Say, hey, I understand what you're stating here, and I've been seeing you guys for some time in my credit report. I would like a detailed write-up of exactly when you acquired this, what gives you the right to collect, how you have the right to collect, you verified all the information is accurate, and so on and so forth. Now, the origination date is critical because that states that that's the moment that they acquired the debt, and from that moment, the clock starts to tick for the statute of limitation on how long they have until they have to ultimately cease the debt collection activity. And this is what we call a phase and a timeline. This is so important because a lot of people think, oh, they reset the clock so they can collect indefinitely until whatever. And the reality is that's not the case, right? It's based on the origination. When did they acquire that debt? And from that moment on, the clock starts to tick until whatever statute of limitation you have in your respective state in terms of how much they have or how long they have until they can actually continue or cease collection activities. So that's the second piece to it, right? So again, just to go back to that structure. The first is the root cause and origin and effect, right? What caused that debt? And if it was because of a charge-off account, then we challenge the charge-off itself and the inaccuracies or discrepancies in that charge-off to carry forward with the debt collectors and state that, look, this is information we've notified of the alleged original creditor. You're continuously reporting, therefore you're accepting that this is erroneous. Until such time the original creditor fixes this, you absolutely cannot report, right? And that's the reality of it, because then you're reporting inaccurately, and knowingly doing so is an intentional violation, even after getting this notice from us as customers. So that's the first step. The second, again, just to revisit, is the phase and the timeline. How long can a debt collector stay there? And what is the original date of acquisition of that debt or the assignment of that debt, whenever the timeline starts? From that moment, the clock starts to tick as to how long they have and when the statute of limitation expires to when they actually have to cease debt collection activities. That's a very critical component that we absolutely need to be familiar with. So that's the second step. The third step, I would say, is what we call a logic structure dispute. A logic structure dispute based on everything that we just described. If you notice that we're looking at inaccuracies, discrepancies, incongruent information across all three credit reports, by the way, especially if they're reporting to all three. This is a critical component, right? As you guys know, and if you haven't, creditors, particularly, it doesn't matter who it is, whether it's a debt collector, original creditor, or whoever the financing company is, have to use a singular software to submit data across all three credit bureaus in a very similar fashion. It means the information cannot change across all three. Rarely do we see information congruent across all three, which means that most of the times there is almost always a certainty of an error. So logic structure dispute simply states that let's analyze those credit reports. Let's break down the information that we see there. What is exactly being reported? How is it reported? What's information that we can constantly look at to say, hey, there's discrepancies in these areas, and really breaking all that information down. Now, this is useful for not only debt collectors, but also original creditors that are being discrepant, with the reporting infrastructure and being inaccurate or providing details that are pretty much, hindering your ability to get the financing or increase your score. So this is information that you absolutely need to use in a very confident manner. So again, that's called a logic structure dispute. If you use this very structurally, and if you use it really well, then you have a high likelihood of success. And you have to do this based on the common level of strategy. It's called the common sense approach, right? So again, review the discrepancies, understand that it's uniform reporting from a software side to all three credit bureaus are the same. No information can be incongruent or there cannot be any discrepancy in reporting. The information has to be the same across all three. Linear is what I call it. So with that binary structure, which you have to use now, is a logic structure dispute. So you executed the first step, which is your root cause and effect. How did this start? And structuring a dispute with that original creditor, and then carrying that communication across all of the debt collectors that are participating in that. The second one is the timeline, which is basically how long they have in the phase and when was the original debt acquired to from that moment, the clock starting to tick until such time time they have to cease collection activities. And the third and the final one is basically the logic structure dispute. This process alone is going to help you quite a bit. Not only analyze your credit report, get familiar with the process, but also understand, hey, this is the common sense way of doing things, the most effective way, and having a certainty that, hey, look, you can create an outcome regardless of litigious activities from their side or trying to sue you and so on and so forth, because all these type of structures that you guys would have done is protecting you on a legal basis to state that, hey, look, I've done all my activities to ensure that on my side I'm protected and that I've done everything to ask them and request information which they failed to provide, and therefore this legal claim that they have is inevitably void, right? So with that, like, they have to revisit the clock, they have to go through all sorts of structure, and ultimately they might cease collection activity. And don't be surprised if they give you an offer of settlement, at which point you'll have to do a liquidity analysis to verify what you have in terms of income, in terms of what you can afford, and how you can protect yourself in court, doing it the proper way and notarizing that document, which I will teach, by the way, for all my students in the Insiders edition of the UPCM that's coming up, and I have a new release coming up soon. But all that said, that's the 3-step that you would actually follow to get the maximum and optimal outcome when it comes to dealing with debt collectors. Again, look for statute of limitations. Look for ways to kind of go through the non-compliance of credit reporting. Look for ways to understand the origination and how it happened. All these type of things is actually making a little bit more work on your side, but the end result is we're here to create outcomes that last, right? Not something that's going to be temporary because there's a fancy package created from a supercar name and people are getting scammed right and left. The goal here is to educate you, to give you the maximum value. And trust me, I don't make money from you, buying my course, although I would appreciate that. There's a lot more out there that once you understand the credit game and understand the process of getting into it the proper way, then there's a lot more that you can explore, and then collectively we can work together. Because my main primary activity is investment banking, and a lot of my clients are actually credit repair companies that I'm helping to kind of give them a way to do this very differently. And if you're a customer, or if you've been through a scenario where you're listening to this, you're trying to figure out ways to deal with debt collectors, then this video hopefully give you some insights. And if you did, I would 100% appreciate it if you can give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new to the channel, and turn the notifications on to all, so every time YouTube notifies you when my videos are out, that'll be, you can participate, we can have a discussion, and feel free to leave a comment below so that we can start having discussions about this particular topic today. So with that said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, well, I'm happy that you guys did, and hopefully we can communicate in the future, and hopefully you stay tuned to the channel to get more updates like this. And with that said, this is definitely your guide and mentor, Tarafdar. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye for now.